Happy Monday, everybody. It's time for another edition of Ask Mike. Courtney Mims alongside Mike Irwin here. And as always, before every video, I just want to remind everyone to like and subscribe and even comment. That helps us when it comes to those YouTube analytics, and it keeps us, doing this every week for you guys. So please like and subscribe and comment as well. That really helps us out. Mike, I also had a question from somebody this week that was like, how do I ask a question on Ask Mike? I'm also going to address that really quickly for everybody. We have a lot of new viewership this year. So if you'd like to ask a question on the show, you can go to the hogville.net forum. If you go to the forum page, go down to the Ask Mike forum, make an account, ask your question.
You're going to have to make an account, though. You're going to have to be a member. So that's really easy, and it might take them 3 or 4 hours before they confirm you, but once they do, then you can do that. And
exactly.
There's a lot of to that website, hogville.net. There's a lot more to that than just this.
Yes.
And if you sign up, then you can be a part of their message board. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute because it's a very good message board. It's very well run.
There's a lot of great things there. I love the conversation that you guys have over at hogville.net. If you're an Arkansas fan, or if you're even a college sports fan, go make an account, do that right now. And that's all the plugs I have. So let's get into the questions, shall we? Which is what we're here for. Mike, you're starting us off with Mousetown today, our favorite question asker, or least favorite question asker. Why do Sam Pitman's teams play so much better on the road than at home? The defense put on a show in front of Oklahoma State's fans. They look sluggish and clueless against a UAB team that scored 6 points against Louisiana Monroe the week before. That's crazy. Explain it.
Okay, first I'll start off with their explanation. I would say Sam Pitman's explanation, some of the players' explanations, which I think it's valid to hear from them before we say what we think.
Yeah, their excuses, I'll give you that. I get it.
The first explanation was from Sam Pitman that the defense had 5 guys in green jerseys. They were beat up from the Oklahoma State game. And he said we had a decision to make. We could put 5 backup players in and go full speed on these defensive practices, or we could leave our starters in and know that we can't go full speed. And he said we decided to go with the starters, and he said I could tell as the week progressed it wasn't going very well because it's hard to practice when you're not doing live hitting and stuff like that. So that was one explanation. I think there were, I don't know that they gave this as an excuse, but when we looked, there were 2 starters in the backfield that were missing. So you're missing 2 starters.
Yep.
And then Landon Jackson talked about the fact that, or he was asked about the fact that Travis Williams, the defensive coordinator, missed a lot of last week because his wife was in the hospital in the process of having a baby. So your defensive coordinator wasn't around a lot last week. And he said, yes, that was a distraction, but he said it shouldn't have been. We should have been mature enough to be able to handle that. So that was the explanation on the defensive side. The explanation on the offensive side, and let's just get real, the problems on offense were mostly in the first quarter. They didn't last the whole game. And it was mostly Taylen Williams.
Taylen Green?
Taylen Green.
I got you.
Jaquindon Jackson basically said that Green was nervous when the game started. And he said, I kept looking at him and saying, breathe, play football. Breathe, play football. Now, you may say to yourself, how stupid is that? What is going on? Well, I know somebody that knows him and talked to that person last night. And he said, Arkansas fans don't understand how badly he wants to belong here. He knows that he came in from the outside. He knows he has to be accepted by the fans as their quarterback. And he said this was his first chance to perform in front of what he considers the home crowd, and it was a full crowd, full stadium, and he said he just got nervous. But he got past it and played better from that point on. So those are the explanations. My explanation is that they overlooked these guys. I think the coaches may have done that. I know the players did. Some of it admitted they did. Landon Jackson admitted they did. And yes, that's unacceptable. Guess what? I'm going to plead guilty because I did too. Because I predicted, what was it, 51, 50?
Yeah, you said you had a very high score.
51 to 10 or something like that. Yeah. What I didn't do was go back and look at this UAB team last year. I was just looking at the fact that they had a big win to start the season, then got killed last week by Louisiana Monroe, and I went, oh, come on. Well, if you go back and look last year with the same quarterback, the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, they did this all the time. They would beat somebody they weren't supposed to beat and lose to somebody they weren't supposed to lose to. These guys scored 20 points on Georgia last year. Georgia's not dog meat. Their defense is not dog meat. No. So I don't think it's unacceptable for Arkansas to give up 27 to a team that Georgia gave up 22. So when you look at all that, it doesn't look as bad. Here's the problem. When you're trying to convince fans that this is not last year's team, you don't do it by playing like this. You just don't. It's probably unfair, but I will say that this bunch of Razorbacks, the 2024 Razorbacks, are carrying on their backs virtually every unsuccessful team going back to when Petrino left the first time, because that's where all the problems started. Before that, you had Houston Nutt had some good years. Even Danny Ford had some decent years. Ken Hatfield had good years. You had Hatfield. You had Jack Crow. He was sort of like Chad Morris. You got a couple of coaches thrown in there that didn't do very well, but there was a history of at least being competitive in the SEC until Petrino got fired. And ever since then, it's mostly been bad. And so this team is carrying that on their backs. And you got a bunch of people out there that think that the answer to all of this is the coach needs to be fired. Well, guess what? That's what they've been doing. They've been firing coaches every time you turn around. This coach is fired, that coach is fired, this coach is fired. You don't ever crawl out of this hole doing this. Had a guy call me last night and he made this point, and I'm not saying it's valid, I'm saying this is what he said. He said, the average fan does not understand what's built up here right now, but it may take as much as a season to get these guys going. But next year, if you still have this same coaching staff in place, and he said, they've recruited guys you don't even know about so far. And he said, they're going to be set up good next year. But if you fire this head coach, then you go completely backwards and start all over again. Now, that's what he says. I don't know. I don't know about recruiting and all that stuff. But what I am saying is, whether it's fair or not, that's what it is. And when I sit here week after week in the offseason and all through the spring and summer and tell people this team is not last year's team, and then they play a game where they look like last year's team, what argument do I have?
Yeah,
I mean, I had to go on social media and say, yeah, maybe I have to adjust my thinking a little bit here. I didn't expect this. So it may well be that if they go to Auburn and play well, then we can put this game into perspective. But right now, the only perspective is they didn't play as well as they should have, and there's really no excuse for it.
Yeah, and that was what I was going to say, Mike, is I get where the fans are frustrated because it feels like more excuses, right? And I get that you had some guys in green jerseys. I get that. But I talked about this on the Pig Trail show the other day, and I said this looks like a classic case of overlooking your opponent, because on Tuesday it was a bit of a red flag, and I talked about this on the radio during the week and even on our Pig Trail show on Sunday. It was a red flag for me as Trey Biddy asks pretty much every week about the opponent, right? Kind of like a scouting the opponent, right? And when he asked Jaquindon Jackson and Andrew Armstrong, what have you seen out of UAB's defense, right? They both looked at each other, laughed a little bit, and then said, we're focused on ourselves. And I said, that was a weird answer. It was strange. You can go back and watch it for yourself. We have the press conferences all posted on our YouTube page. It just was weird.
Yeah, and then even worse, TJ Metcalf.
Oh, no, don't talk. Oh.
You said that the defensive guys did talk a little bit about him.
They did, yeah.
But he ended up saying, I think we'll pitch a shutout. And see, that's the second straight week where some defensive guys popped off. And you just can't do that. You can't.
Yeah, you've got to hold it in. And I think that goes to a little bit back to what you mentioned to me off air. I can't remember if you mentioned it just now, but some leadership. Taking some leadership.
Well, if you're Landon Jackson, you say, yep, we didn't play hard. This happened. We shouldn't have let the fact that our defensive coordinator was in the hospital with his wife, we shouldn't have let that affect it. But you did. What I know about that 2021 team is you had guys like Grant Morgan and Bumper Poole, upperclassmen, that every day during the summer, every day in August camp, they didn't let the younger players adopt those attitudes. They pushed it, and they pushed, and they pushed. That's what this team needs, and it's still apparently what it doesn't have because they didn't have it last year.
Listen, I heard Sam Pitman saying that in one of the press conferences not too long ago before the season opener, and said, we can't choose team captains because we have too many leaders on this team. And I said, well, that's a great problem to have.
Apparently they don't.
Well, that's the thing. I want to see some leadership. I want to see Landon Jackson step up.
It needs to start this week.
It really badly needs to start this week, and we're going to get into that in this show. We have two questions, though, about Taylen Green and his performance against the Blazers. Hog Talica, love the username. New guy, I love it. Hog Talica. I'm a big Taylen Green fan, but there are times when he will try and get a big play downfield rather than dumping the ball off for a short play that keeps the chains moving. What say you? He's not the only one to ask a question about Taylen Green. Another question is from Blood Red Hog, who asks, are you seeing improvement with Taylen's ability to make the correct read and throw the ball accurately? Scrambling out of the pocket on pass plays usually won't work against SEC opponents.
Okay, let's go back last week. Clint Sterner, the former Razorback quarterback who now has a sports talk show in Houston, he basically came out last week and said Taylen Green should be benched. Because
DJ said had some question marks about him too.
Because he's not running the offense. He's improvising too much. He's trusting his own ability to run with his legs and find people open rather than run the play. And then he came back this week and said the same thing. Okay, here's my reaction to that. I get what he's saying. And do I think he needs to be more disciplined? Yes. Do I think Bobby Petrino will continue to work with him? Yes. But I remember a quarterback not so long ago that did improvise, and I heard the same garbage when he was first starting, and it really went on a lot. And we know who that guy was. He was Matt Jones, and we know that there were plenty of times, because I talked to guys that were in the huddle with him after he left, and they said, yes, there were times when he went, we're not running that play, and he'd run his own play. And there were times when he just didn't run the play, started off, saw it wasn't working, and improvised and made it work. Here's the bottom line on that. If you can take something that's not working and make it work by improvising, I don't want to take that away. I don't want to take that ability away. And I'll give you a good example. On that last touchdown, which was critical in the fourth quarter, they got down in the red zone, and Taylen Green got careless. He took the snap, and it was supposed to either be a handoff or a fake, and he was going to take and peel around. And what he did instead was he was late or lazy or whatever in pulling that ball out of Jaquindon Jackson's hands like this, and Jackson hit it and knocked the ball loose. Could have been a disaster. He fell on it.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what, they're going to end up having to kick a field goal here, and that may not be enough, the way the defense has been giving up yardage to these guys. On the very next play, there was a snap low and to the left.
Yeah, I saw
he reached down and grabbed that thing and took off and went around the corner and scored. So he created a problem, solved it with his own athletic ability. So I don't want to take that away. I don't want him, I hope Petrino doesn't go, hey, you can't do that anymore. And I don't think he will. It's just a matter of being a little bit more refined.
Yeah.
And if what we saw last week was nerves, because he didn't show that in the early part of the Oklahoma State game, he didn't act, he was fine. So I can believe that maybe, and yet he did show it at the first part of the Little Rock game. So maybe playing in front of the home crowd right now, he's still adjusting to that, which will, if true, will mean he will play better on the road, and I'm fine with that. This game is critical this week, so if he goes out and he's focused, then everything will be okay.
I think we'll see how he adjusts going into this week, because if it really was a one-off, right, if it really was what Jaquindon Jackson was saying, what Sam Pitman was saying, that nerves got to him. And I could kind of see that. I'm going to stick up. I know I said I understand where the fans are talking about excuses, excuses, excuses. I do see that a little bit, because I know you said you talked to someone who knows him. I got to talk to him before the season started, and I could tell, I think I even said it on this show, I could tell how much he cared about wanting to prove to the fan base he is their quarterback. He's their guy. Yep. And I think he said that I've never been in the SEC. I want to be in the SEC. I want to show people I belong here. I belong at Arkansas. And so I do kind of get that from him, where the nerves could have taken over. I think this week will be really telling, right? To see if those nerves get the best of him again, or if that's, gone in the past, it's done now. So We'll see what happens this week. Chi-Town Hog recalls last show you said there were two groups of fans, negative and optimist. What about the fans who have concerns? We don't want to see Sam fired, yet we do see the problems that he has created. The negative on Hogville that wants Sam fired is the smallest group. So why spend 2 weeks talking about the smallest group? We actually had a lot of concerns about this in the YouTube comments as well.
Okay, first of all, I wasn't talking about Hogville at all.
I know.
I was talking about Twitter and Facebook. Hogville is a managed message board with moderators, and you don't get as much craziness on there. What I was talking about for the last 2 weeks, and the reason I split them into two groups, not 3 or 4, you could split them into 100 groups if you wanted to, but I was talking about two basic groups of fans. And I included in that largest group would be people that don't necessarily think everything's going great, but they don't necessarily think the solution is to every issue is to fire the coach. The other group, which is a smaller group, blames Sam Pitman for everything. It doesn't matter what it is. They're doing it again this week. Some of that was his fault, some of it wasn't. Some of the Oklahoma State stuff might have been his fault. It wasn't all his fault. They were blaming him for stuff that happened in the season opener, which how could you blame a 70-0 win? So that's what I was doing. I was separating the two. Now look, those people lurk. I was talking to a guy last night. They lurk. They wait for something they can jump on. So they're looking for any sort of issue, and then they'll come out and they'll go after Sam Pitman.
That's true.
I don't have a problem with them having a concern. Here's my problem with those people. They've got a one-track mind. There are other issues here. Talk about some of those other issues. If all you ever do is say, fire Sam Pitman, fire Sam Pitman, fire Sam Pitman, you don't have any credibility with me because you're a one-trick pony with an agenda. And not everything is that simple. If the ultimate answer, and look, Arkansas's had a lot of coaches fired. Guess who else fires coaches left and right? Florida. And guess who else is fixing to find out that it's hard to get a coach when you fire coaches after 2 and 3 years?
Florida.
You know, it is. Yes. It gets harder.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So.
But the point is, I'm not saying you can't fire a coach because you've fired a lot of coaches, but I do say you've got to be careful. I went back in my mind and looked at all the coaches that have been fired here or basically run off, technically fired but left, like Houston Nutt because he was mad, and a lot of the fan base was rejecting him. And in almost every instance, what I saw was a coach that at one time had been successful, but there was a commonality there. And you know what it was? A bad relationship between the AD and the coach. And by bad relationship, I don't necessarily mean they're mad at each other. I'm saying you've got to stay involved. The biggest problem Jeff Long had at this school was he had one of the best coaches that ever coached here, Bobby Petrino, but Petrino was flawed. He had some issues. And if Jeff Long had gotten involved and stayed and gone in there, Petrino might have gotten mad at first. Hey, why are you always coming and talking to me? Because I'm your boss, and I want to know what you're doing. I'm not micromanaging you, but I want to know what's going on. And I'm going to stay in touch with you. And then you get used to having him around. And then when he starts going, hey, what's all this stuff I hear about this girl? Are you involved with somebody? He could nip that in the bud, and he didn't. And there were other issues that came up with other coaches where you had an AD that didn't get involved. So I think a lot of times you could prevent a coach from being fired if you were just closer to the guy and talked to him and talked about issues that are going on. And that's why I think what happened in the offseason was that Hunter Yurachek looked at Sam Pitman's plan and went, I think this is a good plan. He got blasted for it, but I'm going to hire Petrino. I've got a new offensive line coach. We're bringing all these new guys on the offensive line. We're bringing all these new guys in the secondary. We've looked at problem areas last year, and we've addressed them with kids out of the portal. Sometimes when you bring people in the portal, it takes an extra year for that to work. And maybe that's what it is. Maybe it'll take an extra year for this, as the guy told me last night. But he believes this team, with these players and this coaching staff, is capable of 9 or 10 wins in the SEC.
Well, to kind of combat that idea, there are other teams that go and use the transfer portal just like Sam Pitman, plug the holes, and they're out there winning. You know, they're out there consistently winning. So I will say there is something to be said about, you know, questioning the coaching staff and questioning what's going on there. There is. And I will stick up for the fans there. But I do believe you're right that Hunter Yurachek and Sam Pitman do have a good relationship. I don't think that he's hands-off when it comes to the football program. I don't think he's hands-off when it comes to any program. I see him everywhere, right? I mean,
I just have an issue with one-trick pony fans, that every problem can be solved by doing this one thing. It is more complicated than that.
Well, it's more complicated than that because things have changed in the past 5 years in the college football landscape, in the college sports landscape, right? We have NIL, we have the transfer portal. Things are different now than they were just a few years ago.
Right.
And so I think you do have to look a little bit deeper into it. Yes, do I believe that there are things on the coaching staff? Absolutely. But there are some people, there are fans out there, Mike, that know that are going, wait, if they fire Sam, does that mean some of this coaching staff leaves? Does that mean Bobby leaves? Does that mean Travis Williams leaves? They like those guys. I know they do. So
what are we really talking about here with Pitman? You know what we're talking about? 2000, the COVID year. He got shafted. They had the worst schedule, the toughest, miles worse than anybody else's. They played Alabama and Georgia. Their schedule was unbelievable. He won 3 games, but he really won 4 because that Auburn job was a screw job, and everybody knows it. They won that game, and they had it taken away from him. He could have had a 5th because there was a provision. If you don't have enough players at a position because of COVID testing, you can postpone a game to the week after the end of the regular season. And he could have done that with LSU. He made a mistake. He said, no, we're going to go ahead and play. And it cost him the game. They'd have won that game if they had just postponed it, because they almost won it without all their D-line.
That was on him. To be fair, that was on him.
But he came very close to winning 5 SEC games that first year. Tough schedule. The next year, come on. They won 9 games that year. They didn't perform poorly at home. They performed well at home. They won big games at home. And they beat Texas at home, and everybody was happy and storming the field. Okay, so what happens the next year? KJ Jefferson missed 3 games with injuries and played in a 4th in which he didn't work out that week, and he didn't play well in that game. That's 4 games that if they had won, they won 7 games anyway. If they win all 4 of those games, give me a break. Who knows what would have happened if Jefferson hadn't gotten hurt that year? Now, what I will blame him for is he allowed Kendall Briles, his offensive coordinator, to develop a guy as a backup quarterback who it was obvious to me when he was a true freshman he wasn't a viable option. And Pitman didn't step in and say, ooh, wait a minute, this guy's not our backup.
Yeah.
So maybe that's on him. But they still won 7 games, went to a bowl game, and won the bowl game, right?
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here? Everybody is basing this on last year. 1 year. He's been here 5 years. He's had 1 really bad year. Do you fire a guy based on one bad year? Most schools don't. Even Chad Morris lasted 2 years, under those circumstances. So let's hold on a little bit here and see how this year develops.
I only laugh because when you say, do you fire a guy after 1 bad year? Well, Florida fired a guy that really did just have a bad year. Halfway through the year got rid of him. Well,
yeah, they did do that. You're talking about Mullen?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whatever. But I certainly understand why those fire Sam Pitman people question him. But I'm not prepared to say just yet that that's the answer, because I know what's going to happen if they make the change. I know you're going to go backwards, and if you don't think you go backwards, you don't know how this works.
I just think it's crazy because I always ask the question, who are you going to go out and get? And we're going to talk about that because I believe there is a question about that in our show. Snoop Hogg says, we also didn't have 2 key secondary players, but yes, they definitely regressed this week. And you mentioned the guys that were out in Jalen Braxton and Hudson Clark.
Braxton is back this week. That's good news.
Yep.
But you may have lost Hudson Clark for the year. I don't know. They haven't said that. But I'm hearing rumors that this situation with him is not good. So I don't know. I hope he can be back next week.
We don't know anything about it right now. So that could, again, we'll kind of hold our breath there to see what's kind of going on.
Hope that the rumors that I heard are not true.
I don't like rumors, Mike. Don't tell me about rumors. Don't do that. Don't tell me about rumors. But I do like TJ Metcalf there as well. I do think that even if he is out for the season, I think TJ Metcalf is a talent.
And Metcalf just needs to stop running his mouth and play football and stop overrunning ball players and pulling their helmets off to try and make the tackle after he's run past them.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's something that they're going to address this week. I'm sure in that film review that they're going to do. KY Hawk says, how about #1 Georgia having the hang on against Kentucky? We're not the only team that overlooked a team based on the terrible game they had the week before.
And we've talked about that. Okay, we understand it, but Arkansas is not going to be allowed that excuse. I'm sure Georgia fans aren't worried about that. They just wanted to win the game, and so they're not barbecuing them this week.
No.
Well, guess what? Georgia's won 1 million SEC games in a row. You get a break when you do that.
And I'll say this, too. Looking back at the history of that matchup in recent years, right, Mike? The recent times that they've been to Georgia or been to Kentucky.
That's a reason why they shouldn't have overlooked it.
It's true, because they've been close games. What, in 2022, 16-6 final score. 2020, 14-3. I mean, they were, they were low scoring.
This was the worst one of them all. It could have really ruined their season.
No, I know, but it's crazy that they hang
their
on
fans
there.
may not be happy, but they're not going bonkers the way Arkansas fans are. But the point is, they've earned brownie points. Arkansas didn't earn brownie points. They've got, again, they've got last year's team riding square on their backs, and it's going to be that way till they start winning SEC games.
Well, yeah, because people hated what happened last season. They want to see a change, and they're eager to see that change in action. So I understand where they're coming from there. Tim Tino says, love the name, Tim Tino. At the end of the day, a win is a win and gets us one step closer to a bowl game. The power of positivity works. Wouldn't you agree, Mike?
Sometimes it doesn't. Look, this is a fan that's a fan no matter what.
Yeah.
And those people are out there. I always say, every football program, any sport, you need those fans that are so loyal. You could not win a game and they're still happy because they love supporting their team. That's okay. But those fans don't make you better. They don't. They give you maybe emotional support. But I will continue to defend fans' right to complain, because those people that complain push you to play harder and push you to play better.
Yeah, you need, it's called constructive criticism.
You really need both. You got to have your emotions. It's like when I was raising up my 2 boys, my wife was like nice and I was mean.
Oh, good cop, bad cop.
Yeah, I was the mean guy.
Oh, okay.
And I'd come home and she'd say, hey, Josh did this and Terry did that. Okay, where's my belt? And I wouldn't whoop them hard. And it was always with their pants on, jeans, but whack, whack, whack. And it was the idea that I'm not putting up with this. It didn't hurt them.
No,
it was emotional. My dad's whacking me with this belt, even though it's not really hurting.
I bet they learned their lesson,
But then the mom comes back and goes, oh, we love you and all this stuff. Let me tell you, my boys turned out great. Yeah. I'm telling you, they have their own kids are really good. They don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
They might have driven me nuts as a kid, but they're responsible adults. And so what I'm saying is, you need kind of a good cop, bad cop situation, I think.
I think so as well. And I think it's okay when there are fans out there. And like, we had a question about it of like, hey, about the negative fans and talking about, some of us are negative, but we're not trying to get Sam Pitman fired. I like the balance of it. You always need a balance in every fan base. Pig's Feet says, don't know about you, but I was impressed with the coaching of Trent Dilfer. He had his team ready and believing. If he had more talent, ...
Okay, I'll agree that he did a good job preparing for this game, but let's not get carried away. Let's do what we didn't do last week, and I admit I didn't do it. Let's look at the whole time that Trent Dilfer has been there, because Dilfer was there last year. They had games where they beat teams that they shouldn't have beaten, and then they lost to teams that they shouldn't have lost to. Again, they scored 20 points on Georgia last year. They've shown they can play well. They've also had games where their offensive line didn't block, where their quarterback got sacked, where he threw interceptions. It's just I don't know, you talk about an up and down program. That's about as big an up and down when you look at everything they've done. I mean, they won 4 games last year. That's not great.
It's not great, yeah.
So how many are they going to win this year? 3, 4? I don't know. So I'll take my hat off to him for the way they prepared for this game, but who knows what they're going to do this week.
If it's like you said, and there is a pattern there, may not be a great week for them.
Yeah.
May not be a great week for them. John says players shouldn't do midweek pressers.
Totally
I
disagree
yeah.
with that. Totally disagree. Players should do midweek pressers. Players should be instructed before they do the pressers. And some people have blamed this on Kyle Parkinson, the SID, and said he's the one to tell them not to say stupid things in bulletin board. He's not their coach.
No.
That's got to be impressed upon them by their position coaches and by their head coach. I believe in putting players in front of the cameras, but only after they've actually been taught how to do that. And I'm not talking about brainwashing them. I'm saying, look, you can be honest without being stupid. You don't have to make wild predictions and disrespect the other team and say bulletin board material because you're just making it harder on us when the game starts. That's all. That's all it takes.
But that's the thing I have the question about this, is that they are media trained. I know Kyle does a great job media training them. We've talked about
then you got to come back and reinforce it.
Kyle did those things with them.
Right,
he does media training.
But this is what you do if you're Sam Pitman, and I hope the position coach would do it. But if not, I'm Pitman. I'm going to intervene. I'm going to say, TJ Metcalf, you are not doing any midweek pressers anymore this year because of what you did.
Yeah.
You didn't learn your lesson? Okay, here's your lesson. You're not talking anymore.
But then the answer I talked about earlier in the show, Jaquindon and Andrew, when asked about the opponent, I think you should always be prepared every week to be asked about the opponent. I mean, Trey does a great job every single week in being consistent and asking about that.
It's not like they don't know it's coming.
That's what I'm saying. So why are you so ill-prepared for that? I don't know if that's a Kyle thing.
I would accept ill-prepared better than smarting off.
Oh, okay. I mean,
you can be ill-prepared, but it's insulting when you smart off.
I understand. Both are things that I don't think you should do in press conferences. And I think Kyle does a really good job at preparing them for what the media is going to say, is going to ask them. But I don't know. I think
there's only so much he can do. All he can do is make suggestions. He's not in charge of those guys.
No.
You know,
he
I
can
guess
say, don't
theoretically
mention this,
he's in charge of them when they're in a press conference. But what does that mean? Come on.
Well, they still have free will. They can still get up there and answer the questions however they see fit. He can guide them through what might be asked, but again, I just think you should be prepared every week to answer about your opponent and have a good answer about that to make you look like you know what you're talking about there. Anyways, all right, I'm going to digress there. Marty Bird's proxy wants to know, what is the story with Jarius Wright and Joe Adams being turned away from the football facility? There has to be more to this story. In what context did this happen?
Okay, the original story was based on apparently a social media post.
So it was a social media post. It was a Facebook post made by Jarius Wright's wife, is
and
what
then
I was
she
told.
later took it down,
She
right?
later took it down,
Okay,
correct.
when that gets taken down, what does that say to you? What does that say to me? Oh, wait a minute, maybe she got ahead of herself. Maybe there were some things that, in retrospect, looked back and said, I don't think this is a good idea. Look, I sent a question over there to the athletic department higher-ups. Mm-hmm. If you want to answer this question, if you know, here's the question. If you don't, you don't. I got no response. So I don't think they want to answer it. And I don't think Sam Pitman addressed it today in the press conference. So
no, he didn't.
The bottom line is I can't talk about this because I don't know what happened. Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't there. And the person who said it happened now has taken the post down. My speculation when I first saw this, and I think it was last night, but my speculation was that maybe Sam Pitman knew this team didn't play very well, and he didn't want a bunch of other people in the locker room because he was going to go in there and tell them what he thought about the way they played. And you don't want a bunch of other people in there when that's going on. It's not like they beat Texas. You beat Texas, yeah, open the locker room to all former players. We'll all come in here and celebrate together. But if you don't play well, you don't want them in there.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know that's what happened. I just know that it is. Whoever made that decision, if it was made, if it happened that way, probably had a reason for doing it that way. I just don't know what it was.
Yeah, and we don't know until we get an answer from them. But she's taken down the post, so clearly something in that original post maybe was misconstrued,
maybe?
Or wasn't the full story. Again, we don't know the full story. We just know what the context that you guys know from that Facebook post. But again, I agree with you, Mike. I think there's more to the story, and maybe there was some miscommunication as well. That happens a lot. I know that happens at every program, right? I mean, the Florida locker room, I was asking a friend of mine, she was like, yeah, they have to go through in advance before the game, if they want to come into the facilities in the locker room, things like that, they have to let us know way in advance. What if Jarius and Joe just walked up and said, hey, can we come on in? I don't know.
Yeah.
But those things usually have to be set up in advance and things like that. So we don't know the full story. If we have it, we'll answer it next week. WV Hog Fan asks, which SEC teams do you think will make the 12-team playoff?
Okay, I think there's 7 of them that are undefeated right now. Is that right?
Yes, I think
7
so.
of them?
If I'm looking at it, I think you're right. Yes.
It's Tennessee.
Yep.
It's Ole Miss.
Yep.
It's
Alabama.
Texas. It's Alabama.
Yep.
It's Georgia.
Georgia. Yep.
And Oklahoma. So
Yes.
that's 7.
Yes.
Okay. I don't think 7 get in. I don't think 6 get in. Maybe 5. Maybe, depending on what happens the rest of the year. I think 4 is more likely.
Yeah.
If it's 4, I'm going to go with, and I hate to do this, I'm going to go with Texas. I'm going to go with Tennessee.
Yep.
I'm going to go with Ole Miss. I'm going to go with Georgia.
Yep.
That's the 4.
I agree with
And
that.
I would add Alabama as a 5th if 5 get in.
Okay. I like that. I think you're right on that.
I just don't think they're, all of those are not getting in.
No,
I don't
they're-
see it. Missouri, I don't see Missouri. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I'm leaving them out. And I'm leaving, who else am I leaving out there?
Well, Oklahoma you're
leaving
leaving out, but yeah.
I'm
but,
leaving those 2 out for sure, and maybe Alabama.
TL Slayton wants to know, why do I keep hearing that Barry Odom will be the next head coach at Arkansas? Why is he the guy? Well, he's looking real good with UNLV right now.
Well,
they're 3-0.
they're winning games. I think a lot of people are assuming that he would keep Petrino because he hired Petrino when he first got there, and then Petrino only stayed a few days and then went to A&M. But there's a relationship there, so maybe he keeps him. But the problem is he's got his own young offensive coordinator. He's considered a prodigy or some kind of genius or something.
Yes.
He runs that full house backfield.
That go-go offense.
They do all this crazy stuff. Problem is, I watched them against Kansas. Their offense was poop. I mean, it was bad. They didn't have any passing game. Their running game consisted of their quarterback scrambling. Yeah. And I'm telling you, we talk about all the bad things that happen to Arkansas and things they do to themselves and all that. I'm telling you, Vegas won that game because crazy stuff kept happening good for them. The guy would get sacked and there'd be a penalty. And then, Kansas would do something and that gets called back. And I thought they were beat 2 or 3 times and then stuff happened. And the point is they were really lucky to win that game.
But they won it.
But I'm not taking anything away from him. If he continues to win games, here's what some people say. Nobody else wants this job, but he does want it because he's been here before.
And isn't his family, I think his family is still here, right?
So he would want to come back.
Yeah.
And if he wins enough, he would get the job and come back. But I talked to somebody last night that he was like, do you understand how bad his defense was here? We don't want that guy back here. The defense will be terrible. And I said, well, he'll have his own defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Who is the former Arkansas linebackers coach, Michael Schur.
So I don't know. He may not even be the guy. That's speculation. That's going to happen at some point. At some point, Sam Pitman's going to be gone one way or the other.
Right.
Either retired or he's fired, or he just kind of goes off on his own or whatever. That's going to one of those things is going to happen. So the answer is, what happens at that point? Well, it changes. It's what's going on at the moment. Right now, if Sam Pitman jumped up today and said, I'm done, I'm going off to Hot Springs, then maybe Odom's the guy. I don't know. But that doesn't mean he would be next year or the year after or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's because you see you see him take a UNLV team at 3-0 to start off the season.
Most important thing they did was beat Houston badly, and when Houston played the pants off Oklahoma, so that was impressive.
Exactly, and so they're 3-0 for the first time since
they weren't
1984?
impressive last week. Not to me. I watched that game. They were not impressive.
We'll just see what it keeps happening. We'll see what keeps happening. I mean, listen, shout out to Coach Odom because he is rolling with that UNLV team.
I kept asking myself, where's this hot shot, crazy offense that nobody knows what?
Well, it's nice to see Catalan. He looked good in the game.
He played well.
He played extremely well. So, it's
and
nice.
how about Rocket Sanders?
I know. My goodness, right? They should have won that game.
I know.
They should have won that game.
He was amazing.
Hot Dogger asks, why do we have co-players of the week? Can't we just pick one? I think he's talking about the SEC players of the week.
That's
right?
pretty easy to explain. You've got a conference office, and they've got all these players out there that play well during the week. And they want to get as many of those people publicized as possible. So if you had a guy that played well in this game, but then some other player, they don't want guys going, wait a minute, what about our guy?
Yeah.
So if there's a question, they have a co-player to keep everybody happy.
Exactly.
And how would that affect you as a fan? I'm thinking about this. If I'm a fan and one of my guys, one of my players off my team that I support is named co-offensive lineman of the week, whatever, am I mad because they named somebody else? I don't care. As long as my guy gets mentioned, right?
I think it's with Arkansas fans. They always notice the co-player of the week because it happens quite frequently with Arkansas.
Maybe then it will happen less if you win more games.
That's true. That's very true. But I think it's just kind of they feel like, oh gosh, there's another co-player of the week because it happens frequently. I'd like to go back and look to see how many times it's happened with Arkansas versus other SEC programs to see if there really is.
We need to get an intern on that right away.
We'll get an intern on that right away. Adam is our intern. He's awesome. We'll get him on that stat looking up right away. The Bionic Pig says, hypothetical fun question. Which former Razorback defensive coordinator in their youth could evolve and be effective against today's OCs? And I think, are these who you're choosing out of?
And he's saying which one of these would be better today.
Okay, so and that's what he's giving you. Those aren't his rankings. That's
these are
just
my options.
These are your options. Okay, so.
Fred
You
Goldsmith.
can see them. Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't know if you wanted me to read them. I think
Fred
everyone
Goldsmith,
can see them.
Monty Kiffin, Keith Burns, Dave Womack, and Reggie Herring. Look, there's one guy that's head and shoulders above all those other guys as a defensive coordinator. That was Monty Kiffin.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the guy that engineered the Orange Bowl win over Oklahoma and held Oklahoma, which was an offensive juggernaut, held them to 6 points. I mean, the guy was amazing. Now, he wasn't a great head coach, but he was an outstanding defensive coordinator. And so I don't see anything about him and what he did that wouldn't translate to today's game. He was just very complete, very thorough, very good at what he did. And some of those other names, I wouldn't even have them on a list. Some of them were better. Womack, I always had respect for Womack. Herring was a decent defensive coordinator. He talked too much, talked to the media too much. He was he leaked stuff to the media all the time, and it wasn't always helpful. Fred Goldsmith, Frank Broyles disliked him so much that when he couldn't get Hatfield to fire him, he got him a head coaching job at Rice. I was in Frank's office.
Oh yeah, this is that story.
I was in his office setting up for an interview, and he goes, go over there and set up over there in the corner, and I'll be with you in a minute. And then he's on the phone with this guy, and I can hear him say, oh, Fred is the equal of any defensive coordinator I've ever had. Monty Kiffin, all of them, he's great. And I'm sitting there thinking, Frank, you think the guy's terrible. So when he hung up, I went, man, you got a big nose, but you just Pinocchio'd on that. And he just started laughing.
That's such a great story.
And he got the job. So he got Fred Goldsmith out of here. So I don't know. I wouldn't list him as one of the ones. I don't know how it would translate to today's game.
That's hilarious. I love that story. You've told me that story a couple of times.
It was pretty funny when it happened.
That's a great story. S. Giles asked, did you have a chance to watch the Central Florida TCU game? And if you did, how did KJ Jefferson look to you, Mike?
He looked a lot like, to me, he did in those earlier seasons, maybe 2021, even 2022 when he wasn't hurt. He was effective. He did all the things, you know. He was pretty relaxed and calm, and he made some yardage on some plays when he shouldn't have. I thought he threw the ball well. I thought he was patient. They got really far behind early, and then he didn't lose his composure, and they came back and they won the game. I'm not a big Malzahn fan, but that was a huge win for Central Florida.
That was a huge win. And the other thing, too, is I'm looking at him and I'm going, man, he's going to beat Florida again this year. That's exactly what he's going to do. And speaking of Florida, that leads into our next question. The Hawk Hawkins says, I see where your good buddy Dinkowitz is the leading candidate to replace Billy Napier at Florida. I don't know. I'm questionable on that information there. Would he leave Mizzou for the Swamp? They'll throw some big-time bucks at him.
Well, we'll acknowledge there are other names mentioned ahead of Drinkwitz.
Yes,
but
yes.
Other than that, is it Is it out of question that he would get offered? I don't think so.
No.
You think that he probably is not going to get the offer and it'll be other people. And that's fine. I think this is where you and I disagree. You think that they may have a chance at Lane Kiffin. I think Lane Kiffin is laughing at them if they offer him a job. Why would you want to go there? Florida is the Arkansas of the SEC East. They just keep firing people. Oh, we got to fire the coach. Why not fire the coach? They ran off Dan Mullen, who was a good coach, just ran him off. They're dopes.
I disagree with that, and I've been on the record saying I think that was a stupid decision by Florida to run off Dan Mullen and hire Billy Napier.
The stupidest thing Dan Mullen ever did was leaving Mississippi State. He had it made there. He turned them in. That was the best they've ever been. So the point is, I don't think Lane Kiffin would take that job. And if Drinkowitz, or whatever, if he got offered that job, I don't think he would take it. I do not. Why would he want to leave Missouri where they love him? Plus, as long as he's Missouri, he can sit around and make fun of Arkansas all the time. You know, and he has all kinds of friends back here, so he can take shots. So I'm not saying he won't ever leave Missouri, but if he does, I think he could get a better job than that one.
I just want to ask the Hawk Hawkins where he saw that he was the leading candidate.
I saw it. It was posted by some media person in St. Louis. I don't remember the person, but yeah, it was posted. And then you even looked it up, and he wasn't the leading candidate. He was listed on the list.
He's listed on a lot of lists for it. I just don't think he's the leading candidate.
Well, he might become the leading candidate if everybody else turns it down.
Let's hope not. I can confidently say I really hope that that is not.
He would not take that job.
Well, good. I don't want him there either. So I don't like him either, Mike. So I don't want him there. I'd rather see somebody else. Like we can't. I know you think they don't think Lane Kiffin. He's smarter than that.
I was talking to somebody last night that knows him really well, and he said, "Let me tell you, he's smart. Okay. He's a really smart guy. He pops off too much. He's too much of a little smart guy." But he's really, really smart. And if he's smart, he won't take that job if it gets offered.
Okay, well, I just hope that they don't even get to him on the list. That's kind of just where I'm at right now with that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Billy Napier's still there as we're recording this show today, so we'll see how long that lasts. Armand Abbey says, I'm losing interest in this football team until basketball begins. Here's a question for you. I take it that you're a 60s high school guy, so what is your favorite Beatles tune? If you don't like the Beatles, then I'm dumping this show. Wow.
Okay, so he doesn't have to dump the show because I do like the Beatles. Okay. I liked them a lot. I didn't like them when they first came out, but when I Feel Fine, which is about their third or fourth hit, came along, I went, yeah, they're really good. Okay, so my favorite Beatles song, and you got a lot of stuff to choose from.
There's a lot of good ones, yeah.
It was might have been the last song that McCartney and Lennon co-wrote. Might have been one of the last songs they ever recorded. I'm not sure on that. But it does have another guy listed in there. And that ought to be enough. If you're a Beatles fan, you ought to know what I'm talking about. So I'm not going to say who it is, but we'll see if Armand Abbey is smart enough to answer my question back to him and get it correct.
I like it. I like that. Maybe some commenters. It's going to be a challenge for the commenters. If you get to the end of the video, let us know.
We'll see if he's as smart. He knows. I mean, he threw the question at me. I threw it back at him.
So you're trying to get him to guess the song you're talking about?
With the clues that I gave him, which should be easy.
All right. I don't know. I know I grew up in England, but we weren't really a Beatles listening household. So I like Yellow Submarine. That's probably one of mine.
When I was in college, guys that would like sit around and have drinking parties, that's what they'd do. They'd have their mug, and then we all live in a yellow submarine. And then when they got through, they would all drink a whole mug of beer and then start all over again and then see how long you could go. And then pretty soon they'd all just be laying there on the floor.
They drink the whole thing? And then...
I wasn't involved in that. I just watched it.
Oh, sure you weren't, Mike.
I just watched it.
Sure you weren't. Wink, wink, you know.
No, I was just watching them.
Okay, all right.
And laughing.
All right, I'll believe that right now if you say that. Anyways, I'm excited to see if Armand Abbey or any of the viewers
I'm sure
get the question
plenty
correct.
of the viewers will get it. I want to know if he can get it.
All right, okay, that's a challenge for you, Armand Abbey. And that's going to do it for this week's Ask Mike. We'll see you next Monday to answer more of your questions.